He was an F-rank adventurer who gets reincarnated as an immortal skeleton and becomes the strongest monster hunter. Ren is an average guy from a small village who decided to be an adventurer 20 years ago, but even after all those years, he is still the lowest ranking adventurer in the city. He wakes up early in the morning every single day, as all of the jobs by the Adventurers Guild are posted on the notice board at dawn. He goes down to check whether there is anything that his weak ass can do, but finds out that all of the tasks were simply too higher ranked for him. Some guys make fun of him for being a b***less loser who is weaker than a loaf of bread. This annoys the crap out of Ren, so he decides to go into the moon dungeons that have already been completely explored. He knows that only very weak adventurers and newbies come here, as the monsters are all super weak, so he comes here every day with some food to try and level up. While walking through the dark and empty corridors, he suddenly spots a hole in the wall bigger than the hole in my heart. He very excitedly looks at his map, only to realize that this area seems to be completely unexplored. He knows that he shouldn't go in as it might get dangerous, but he also realizes that if he makes a map of the hole and the corridors inside of it, he can then report it to the guild and earn a good chunk of money from it. His curiosity gets the better of him, and he starts exploring this part of the dungeon when suddenly he walks through a door and realizes that he has made the biggest mistake of his life as he spots a huge heavenly dragon standing in front of him. Dragons are extremely rare creatures with unparalleled power that makes even the highest-ranking adventurers scared. There was no way that he could ever defeat the dragon, and only watches as the dragon opens its mouth and ends Ren's pathetic life. Everything goes black for him, but sometime later he opens his eyes, surprised to see that he is still alive. He looks at himself in the stream only to realize that he has become a skeleton with no skins or muscles, and only dusty bones. He keeps his brain calm and realizes that he has become an undead, which are immortal monsters that don't die from normal attacks, but even the weakest priest can easily exorcise and kill them on the spot. He is confused about how he can be dead, but still retain his memories, and decides to go back to the town, only to realize that he will be immediately caught by the guards and will be taken to the church only to be killed off. He starts freaking out about this, but somehow calms himself down before grabbing his sword and looking around. He can't spot the dragon anymore, but still decides to get out of the area and back into the corridors. He spots an undead falling down a staircase and a slime monster Netflix and chilling in a room. He ignores them and keeps walking while thinking about his game plan. He comes to the conclusion that he should wait here for a couple of days and hope that some newbie adventurer would come here and understand his problem. While thinking about that, however, he realizes that he doesn't have a face anymore and can't really talk. While he was freaking out about that, he notices a skeleton walking by who stops and turns its eyes towards him. Ren immediately grabs his sword, but realizes that it feels very heavy, and even his movements are much slower than before. This is because he doesn't have any muscles on his body, which made him weaker than an average man. He still continues and tries to lift his sword for an attack only to fall back because of the weight of the sword. The skeleton runs towards him, but just before reaching him, it falls over to the ground as well. Ren sits back up and notices that the skeleton's legs have broken down because of his fall, and this gives him time to think about his strategy. He knows that he can't use his sword skills anymore, but suddenly remembers about his magic abilities. He tries it out, and to his surprise, they are still working. He starts glowing and stands up alongside the other skeleton with his sword in hand. He decides to use his magic to buff his physical abilities, giving him enough strength to lift the sword up and bring it down on the head of the skeleton, shattering its skull as it falls to the ground. After that, he quickly double taps the monster, killing it when suddenly the skeleton starts glowing brightly before its magic energy gets soaked in by Ren. He suddenly remembers his friend with her massive honkers, who once told him that the monsters are very interesting creatures as they can get experience similar to humans. This means that just as humans can get stronger from training, even monsters can do the same and evolve into even bigger and stronger monsters. He realizes that if he is able to reach the point of evolution, he will transform into a zombie, who are much stronger than skeletons and have some muscles on their body. This would also mean that he could cover himself up with some clothes and pretend to be a human. He sets his plan in motion and goes deeper into the dungeons, killing any skeleton he could get his hands on. Every time he killed a monster, the energy he used got absorbed back into him, meaning that no matter how many monsters he killed, he never felt tired. He happily starts walking ahead and peeks around a corner to spot a giant slime sitting in the hallway. He realizes that the slimes might be his hardest matchup as they are very resistant to physical attacks, but are easily defeated by magical attacks. The problem is that he doesn't have enough offensive magic power to kill a slime, and will be forced to use physical attacks. The only way to kill a slime using physical attacks is to hit its core, which instantly kills the monster. He gets ready with his sword and moves forward while the slime immediately shoots globs of acid on him. He is able to dodge all of the acid and rushes towards the slime, hitting it with its sword, as the slime simply falls to the ground and turns into a liquid. He himself is surprised by this and thinks he must have been lucky. He immediately gets out some bottles and starts storing the juices inside, as these juices are used to make moisturizer for old women and lotion in cells who sleep with a body pillow. After that, he finally sits down on a rock, as he has been killing monsters the entire night, but he doesn't feel sleepy or hungry. He looks at the bread he brought with him and thinks whether he will ever be able to eat food again or not. He is a little upset as he still hasn't changed into a zombie and starts playing around with the bread before checking whether all of his magic is working or not. He then purifies his bread so it doesn't go bad. He then thinks about how strong he is feeling right now compared to earlier and thinks that he can easily deal with 3 monsters at once. 4 monsters at once could be problematic, and he would have to run if 5 monsters surrounded him. He starts thinking about how he has had a pathetic life, and even after being an adventurer for 20 years, while training every day, learning about monsters from his mommy milker friend, and doing all the minor jobs he could, he still is a loser, and everyone makes fun of him. Suddenly, he remembers about his wish of become a mithril class adventurer, which is higher than all the other ranks. This fills him with energy, and he rushes forward, determined to become a zombie. He starts killing any monster who comes in front of him, and feels really strong. He then finds a slime who shoots acid at him, but he easily dodges and thrusts his sword deep inside, hitting the core and killing the slime at once. He finally is sure that he is much stronger right now than he was in his human form. While taking out a flask to collect the fluid, he suddenly feels weird and his body starts glowing up. His body starts getting covered with rotten flesh, and he even grows back some hair. He takes out his gloves to inspect his hands and realizes that he has finally completed his evolution into a zombie. He checks his body and then realizes that he has a face now and tries to speak. The voice, however, comes very distorted, so he starts practicing how to speak with this body so that he can ask help from an adventurer. He gets extremely happy as now he can keep killing monsters and evolve into a vampire who is basically a human. The next morning, he keeps making his way through the dungeon when he encounters a bunch of goblins in front of him. The goblins can be difficult to deal with when they are in groups, so he fights with them in a narrow corridor, forcing them to fight one by one. He hits both of them to the ground and backs off before collecting his mana to buff up his physical attributes as well as the sword itself. He has gotten much stronger than he could have ever thought before, and with this new power he is able to slash the heads of both the goblins one by one as they rush towards him. After killing them, he suddenly hears a bunch of noise coming from a nearby area. He gets curious about what the voice could be and goes to investigate. It turns out that a girl has also entered the dungeon and is fighting against a skeleton. She seems to struggle at first, but then swiftly deals with the monster and cuts its head off before going forward to collect the loot. Ren watches this from his hiding place and seems to be very happy to be able to finally see a human after such a long time. He really wants to talk to her, but he is scared that she might get scared after looking at his incel face. He stays hidden and peeps at her, realizing that she must be new in this city, as he knows almost everyone in the city of Malt and would have known about her if she was from here. This makes him come to the conclusion that she must have come here to be an adventurer and must be a rookie as of now. She starts moving forward, and like a total creep, he starts stalking her slowly, following her around wherever she went. While navigating through the corridors, she ends up taking a wrong turn which leads her to the deeper part of the dungeons, and even though Ren wanted to warn her, he would have just scared her instead, so he holds his tongue and simply follows. Suddenly, a skeleton spawns behind her and was going to attack, but she spots it just in time and dodges the attack before falling back. Ren watches from afar as she tries to maintain distance between her and the monster and slashes towards it, but the skeleton dodges her attacks and keeps advancing towards her. Ren notices that even though she seems to have a good basic understanding of how to use a sword, she doesn't seem to have any actual combat experience at all. Because of that, she ends up backing into the wall and gets cornered by the skeleton in a very bad position. The monster advances towards her, but instead of trying to dodge, she decides to take a deep breath and goes on the offensive, slashing at the monster again and again. This turns out to be a big problem though, as the skeleton simply grabs her sword and pushes her against the wall once again before raising his other arm to finish the job. Just before it could kill her, Ren decides to intervene in between and screams loudly before running towards the monster. This distracts the skeleton and forces it to target Ren instead. This was all Ren's plan, as now the girl could use this distraction to eliminate the monster. But she seems to be just as stunned as the skeleton to see a real zombie in this dungeon and stays still against the wall. The skeleton starts moving towards Ren, and he realizes that he will have to kill the monster himself. He empowers himself with his magic and raises his sword before dropping it on the attacking skeleton, cleanly cutting him in half. Ren decides to use this for his advantage and walks towards the girl before trying to talk. He tries to tell her that she is safe now, but his voice comes out to be completely ghoulish, scaring the girl even more. He tries to talk to her and introduce herself, but the moment he takes another step forward, she raises her sword and tells him to back off. He immediately stops moving and tells her that he doesn't mean to hurt her before throwing away his sword. This really surprises the girl, who finally realizes that this zombie seems to be different. Ren uses this opportunity to inform her that he is an adventurer. She is confused by this and doesn't believe him, asking him why he looks like this if he is an adventurer. He replies that he fought against a dragon and died before getting transferred into this body. She still seems confused but bows down to thank him for saving her life. Ren tells her not to do that, as adventurers are supposed to help each other at times like these. Even after all this, however, she still seems to be skeptical and keeps her sword up before asking whether she could go back outside the dungeon or will he attack her. He immediately tells her that he is not going to hurt her at all and instead asks for her help. She seems confused, so he tells her that he wants her to buy him some clothes from the city, as he wants to go back to Malt to deal with his problem. She asks whether he wants to hide his body beneath the robe, and Ren confirms her suspicions. He then takes out a small pouch of money and puts it to the ground, telling her to use this to get some clothes and that she could keep the rest. Like a total gold digger, this blonde bimbo picks up the money and introduces herself as Rina, the daughter of a landed knight. She promises to help him, and then slowly makes her way towards the outer gate of the dungeon, while constantly being vigilant and keeping her sword towards Ren in case he wants to attack her. She tells him to wait for her and goes outside, while Ren stands there, thinking sadly then even when he was a human, all the girls used pepper spray on him, and now they are using swords. He wonders whether she will report him to the guild, as adventurers would love to kill or capture a talking zombie, but decides to believe her and goes back inside the dungeons to kill some more monsters. The next morning, Ren again starts killing monsters and faces off against a slime. The slime uses his acid attack, but Ren gracefully sidesteps and then rushes towards the slime, dodging all the attacks before locating the core with his sharp eyes and thrusting his sword deep into the monster, killing it immediately. He was thinking about how strong he has become when suddenly he hears Rina's voice from outside, calling his name. He goes outside to find her in a big room with a sack alongside her. As he approaches her, she again draws out her sword, scared of him, and asks whether he is Ren or some other zombie. He tells her that he is Ren, and that zombies are not found at low-level dungeons like these. She tells him that she got the clothes he wanted, but as he moves forward, she gets scared again and picks up her sword once again. She immediately apologizes and claims that she is still not used to him, but he shouldn't worry, as soon she would be much more comfortable. He tells her not to worry about it before asking whether he could see the clothes. She gives him the green signal, so he opens the sack and finds out a full body coat which has a very plain color. This would be perfect, as it will help him meld in the surroundings much better, and because the robe is so long, it will also hide his entire body almost completely. She tells him to look inside as she bought more things for him, and it turns out that she even got him a pair of boots and some gloves. This makes him so happy that he starts crying like a total beta bitch, but immediately hides it and thanks her for the help. He immediately wears his clothes and starts checking out how easily he could move. He seems to be pretty happy with his looks and decides to shoot his shot and asks Rina out, but she completely shuts him down and tells him to look at his face in a mirror before ever coming near a girl. He realizes that girls don't like nice guys and only go for bad boys, but before he could say anything, she gets down and takes out a mask from the sack. She tells him that his face is not as ugly as when he was a human, but it is still not worth looking at, and tells him to cover it with the mask. Like a total sissy simp, he follows her orders and picks up the mask and checks it before bringing it closer to his face. As soon as he does that, the mask attaches itself to his face magically. She seems to be happy now that she can't see him anymore, but it turns out that the mask was cursed, and now he can't take it out. He kept trying to remove it, but no matter what he did, the mask stayed in place. He tries to use his magic to break the curse, but he doesn't have enough mana to break the curse. She apologizes for basically cursing him, but he tells her not to worry as he can go to a priest and pay him to get it removed. He then tries to comfort her, but she immediately grabs his hand, telling him that she will bonk him on the head if he tries to do anything creepy. But like that one friend-zoned guy who keeps revolving around your girlfriend, he tells her that he just wants to be a good friend and help her. After that, they both get out of the dungeon and call an Uber to go back to Malt. On the way, she tells him that she is from a big city and has come here out in the village area like any influencer to show how grounded and down to earth she is. She claims that she only wants to make some TikToks in the dungeons, and Ren promises to help hold the camera. They finally reach the city and Rina immediately gets out to walk through the city gates, but Ren stops behind. He tells her that there are a lot of people standing near the gates and he feels insecure about his body and doesn't want to go in. She tells him about some body positivity bullshit about how fat girls should love their body, and even the girls who look like mutated hippos are beautiful. This finally makes him feel better about himself, but he tells her that since he is a monster, she will get into trouble if she helps him get in. She claims that she has already committed the biggest crime by being a TikToker, so it doesn't matter, and he agrees with her before they both go in. They get stopped by the guards, who ask about their IDs, and after inspecting the ranks, they ask Ren to show them his face. They don't recognize him and ask whether he has been here before, and he responds that he lives here. They tell him to remove the mask when Rina interferes and claims that his mask is cursed and cannot be removed. The guards seem to be confused, but Rina continues, saying that Ren was in a fight with a monster who injured him severely, so she got him a mask, but the mask was cursed and now they can't remove it. Ren shows them his ghoulish ears and they immediately say you. He lets them try to remove the mask, but they fail, and finally let both of them inside of the city. He thanks her for all the help that she has provided him and pulls on some sick moves to disappear into thin air while Rina looks around for him. He looks at her from top of a building and takes a sigh of relief, happy that he now doesn't have to film her TikToks. At night, he wanders around the city and enters his friend's house, who is sleeping on the couch while her jugs are almost falling down. He wakes her up and tells her that he needs her help. She seems to be annoyed to be woken up this late in the night, but she gets interested when he shows him that he has become a zombie. She sits him down on the couch and starts questioning him about what happened. He tells her that he entered a hidden passage inside of the dungeons where he found a giant dragon who ended up attacking him and killed him. He honestly tells her that after that, when he woke up, he was in the body of a skeleton. She asks whether the dragon is still around, but he replies that he doesn't know for sure and will have to go and check. She seems to be hesitant in believing his story, but she doesn't have a choice as he is literally sitting on her couch in the body of an undead. She paces around the room for a bit and then turns around to ask him whether he thinks he is really Ren, or is it possible that he just has some memories of Ren and is a completely different person. He knows that he has Ren's brain and memories, but when he thinks about whether he has Ren's body or not, he doesn't really have an answer. He tells her honestly that he doesn't know about it, which ends up making her believe that he might actually be Ren himself, as he is the only one who could give such a pathetic reply in front of a girl. She tells him that they can think about it later and asks him what he wants to do now. He tells her that he wants to keep adventuring so he could become a mithril rank adventurer. But the problem is that he can't go to the guild like this, so he would want her to take jobs on his behalf. She then asks whether he has a place to stay, and he refuses, so she tells him that he can stay in her house. Ren has never been in the same house as another girl and immediately accepts the proposal, but Lorraine tells her that she would like to do some research on him in return. Ren knew that Lorraine was a scientist, so he expected this of her, but he still tells her that she can't dissect him, and she agrees as no one has ever been able to research on an actual monster ever, and her research can even find a way to turn Ren back to a human. The next morning, while Ren was cleaning the house like the beta simp he is, Lorraine comes in the room with 2 pouches filled with money. She tells him that she will buy all the slime fluid that he has as she needs it for research, and because she can, but it directly, Ren can get more money as they can evade taxes. The thought of evading taxes excites Ren, who happily accepts the money and tells her that he is going to the blacksmith's shop to spend some dough on a new shiny weapon. He leaves the house and goes outside into the market, where everyone looks at him and backs off because no one likes a simp. He quickly makes his way to the shop and enters through the door. There he is greeted by the perfect girl to make Rule 34 out of, but even she gets taken aback by him. He apologizes for being ugly, but she tells him that it's fine, they don't discriminate against anyone's appearance. He goes up to the desk and puts his sword, which is picked up by the woman, who has a look at it and asks whether he uses it a lot. He thinks that she is talking about his other sword, and replies that he only uses it himself once or twice a night, but immediately realizes that she was asking about the real sword and not the super small one. She tells him that the sword is too old and roughed up to repair, and it would be better to make an entirely new sword. He gives her the go-ahead and then puts one of the pouches filled with money in front of her. She has one look at it and tells her that this should be enough, and he should be able to get a pretty good sword for this money. She then tells him that the owner takes great pride in beating his sword off, so he will take a couple of days to create his sword. He tells her that it shouldn't be a problem, and whenever she is done, she should simply contact Lorraine, the busty researcher. Meanwhile, Lorraine is busy back at the house, reading up about the different types of ghouls and monsters. She notes that zombies are much stronger than skeletons and can survive extreme conditions and even beheading. They usually tend to eat raw animal or human meat and are mostly found in the deep dungeons. She further finds out that there have been some cases of humans being turned into a skeleton when they were killed by an extremely strong monster, but in all of those cases, the humans lost their personality, brain, and memories completely. He realizes that Ren must be an extremely rare case scenario if he is able to maintain his personality and memories, but the chances of that being true is very less. She starts remembering when she met him for the first time in the guild, when she just came to this city and was about to go into the forest alone. One of the adventurers approached her and told her to take Ren with her as a pack-bearer, as he is a measly iron-ranked adventurer, which is the lowest rank. Lorraine didn't want to take a man who looked like a toilet seat with him, but ends up agreeing. While inside the forest, she starts looking for the herbs she needed for her research, but none of them matched the description of the herbs in her books, which makes her question the education system and whether it has failed her. She remembers how she is the youngest researcher from her university, where people wear weird masks as if they are in a high-class orgy. While looking, she finally is able to spot one of the herbs on the ground and starts harvesting it alongside the roots to not damage it. She then calls Ren and tells him to bring the basket here so that she can put the herb in, and like a faithful lapdog, he immediately wags his tail and runs up to her with the basket. She was about to put it in when she suddenly notices that the basket was already filled with the same herbs that she wanted, including the roots, so they were in perfect condition. She asks where he found these and how he learned how to harvest them, but Ren suddenly senses something and turns towards the bushes. He gets his sword up and notices a goblin wielding a bow and arrow from a distance. He realizes that he can't close the distance, so he stands in front of Lorraine and asks her to use her fire magic on the demon. She immediately uses her explosion magic on the monster, and everything gets engulfed in flames. By the time the smoke went away, Ren notices that everything nearby is completely turned to ash and realizes how strong silver rank magic is. Later, while they were walking back, he immediately gets her a glass of water like a faithful simp and promises to donate to her Twitch stream if she looks at him. She ignores him and asks who he is, as he doesn't seem to be a complete newbie considering he knew about the herbs and even what to do in combat situations. He finally reveals that he has been adventuring for quite a while now, but hasn't been able to climb the ranks. He further discloses that when the guild saw her going to the forest alone, they decided to send Ren alongside her in case things went wrong. She asks him where he learned about the herbs, and he tells her that he decided to teach himself how to read and write so that he can become an even better adventurer by knowing all about the herbs and monsters found in the area. She gets impressed by his tenacity and asks whether he can teach her about the local herbs and monsters, and ever since that day, they became good friends. Meanwhile, Ren gets out of the shop where the owner comes out to meet him and even shakes his hand, while the girl hands him a different sword in case he wanted to go adventuring while his new sword was being created. He thanks them for their help and promises to come back a couple of days later in order to get his sword back before heading towards Lorraine's house. That evening, he decides to act like a good housewife and cooks a meal for Lorraine in the kitchen, but still remains in the friend zone, while Lorraine asks him why he isn't eating. He replies that ever since he became a monster, he hasn't felt the need to eat or sleep as he never gets hungry or tired. She tells her that the best path for him should be to constantly try to evolve and reach a form which closely resembles the human so that he can slowly start living normally once again. He agrees, and the next day goes inside of the dungeon once again, where he finds a newbie named Loris with a magnificent hairstyle getting absolutely molested by a golden slime who was about to kill and absorb him. But Ren comes in clutch and saves him from a miserable death by killing the monster. The man thanks him for his help, but without wasting a single second, Ren starts walking back while the man tries to call him. Ren knows that inside a dungeon, everyone is on their own, and if an adventurer gets into trouble, no one is expected to help them. The guy, however, keeps running after him and stops him finally, before begging him to let him join his party. He claims that he is a complete noob who used to be a chef, but because of a debt, he needs to earn at least 15 gold. Ren refuses to take him along and tells him to avoid slimes as they are difficult for swordsmen to deal with. This impresses the Loris, who begs him once again to let him join, but Ren ignores him once again and starts walking. Before he leaves though, he changes his mind and tells him that he could follow him. He starts leading the way through the dungeons and finally reaches the secret passageway, which shocks the man as it isn't present on the map. They go in, and the Loris starts telling him that they should reveal this passage to the guild, which will give them loads of money, but Ren tells him that he will shove his sword very deep inside of his ass if he talks about this passageway. They keep walking and finally enter the dragon's den where he was killed, but this time the area is completely vacated with nothing moving inside. While Ren was looking around, Loris calls out to him and shows him a small passageway that he found. They go through that passage, which leads them to a room with seemingly nothing inside. The Loris immediately walks in, and suddenly Ren notices a magic circle in the middle of the room. He tells Loris to look out, but it turns out that only Ren can see this, and the Loris steps on the circle before completely disappearing. Ren realizes that this is a teleportation circle, and that the Loris must have been teleported to a different floor where a lot of monsters might be present. He thinks about leaving alone, but decides to help the idiot and goes inside the circle as well. He is immediately teleported to a different area where he finds Badly splayed on the ground. Before he could check up on him, however, a giant skeleton appears out of nowhere and stands in front of him, ready to kill him. Ren immediately draws out his sword and gets ready to face off against the skeleton, as he knows the only way he is leaving alive is if he kills this boss. The skeleton attacks Ren immediately with a foot stomp, which Ren is thankfully able to dodge, and after that he immediately empowers himself with his magic before rushing towards the boss with a sword slash to its legs, hoping that the monster would fall over. This does not go as planned though, as the monster is still standing and launches a counterattack, punching the ground, and Ren is barely able to dodge out of the way. He buffs himself with magic again and starts running towards the skeleton, dodging its attack one by one before trying to land a sold hit, but the skeleton is just too strong as it takes no damage from the attack and launches another punch at him. Ren steps out of the way before backing off and starts running around in circles around the monster, trying to find a way out of this problem. But he realizes that there are no doors in this place as it is a boss room, and the only way to escape is to defeat the giant skeleton. He seems to be out of options as he watches Loris lying unconscious on the floor, while the skeleton walks towards him and feels like he should give up, when suddenly he remembers the mithril class adventurer who he met when he was a child. This gave him a surge of inspiration, and he gets ready for a fight as adventurers do not give up. He reinforces his blade with all the magic he has and then runs towards it with astonishing speed before slashing at its ankle. At first it looks like nothing happened, but suddenly the bone on the monster's foot ends up breaking, and it finally topples over to the ground. It tries to get up once again, using all of his remaining limbs, but Ren doesn't give him any chances, and runs up his back all the way to its head before putting all the magic in his sword once again and shattering the monster's skull into 1,000 pieces, killing it. After that, he immediately rushes over to Loris and gives him a Thai massage, using his magic to heal him completely. Loris thanks him for his help before looking over to where he last saw the monster, only to find a huge pile of shattered bones on the ground. The guy asks whether Ren killed the giant, and he replies by saying that he did. This really impresses Loris, while Ren produces a gemstone that the skeleton dropped after dying and tells Loris to keep it. He can't believe his eyes, as this gemstone is bigger than anything he has ever put up his ass, even though he is a size queen. He asks Ren about how he was able to get such a big butt plug, but Ren tells him that it's actually a magical gemstone that monsters drop after dying, and the stronger the monster, the bigger the stone is. He then offers the gem to Loris, saying that he can have it if he wants, but it is not free. Loris immediately thinks that Ren wants to tap that ass, and was almost ready to drop down on his knees for the stone, but Ren tells him that he doesn't want that kind of favors and instead shows him his damaged arm, claiming that he was once attacked by a monster and ended up getting scarred very badly, because of which he feels insecure about his body and wants Loris to help him get stuff from shops or the guild. Loris immediately agrees to that, but asks whether he wants anything apart from that with a wink. Ren, however, doesn't swing that way and refuses the offer once again, telling him that he would rather eat at his restaurant whenever he wants for free. Loris starts crying for getting rejected twice, but agrees to let him eat whatever he wants at his restaurant. Ren then helps Loris up and gives him the gem before they both start making their way outside the dungeons. Loris is confused though, as he cannot see any doorways or anything, while Ren can clearly see the magic circle which can teleport them. He tells Loris to simply move forward, promising that he would be transported back outside the place, and Loris follows his instructions quietly before getting teleported. Ren gets ready to do the same, but looks around to see another magic circle far away, but decides to explore it some other day and gets teleported back outside as well. They both move back into the city, where Loris takes Ren back to his restaurant when his wife comes out of the house, happy to see that Loris is safe. She hugs him tightly before asking whether he is hurt and that they should go see the doctor. He tells her to calm her tits as he introduces her to Ren, claiming that he saved his life and also healed him when he was unconscious in dungeons. After that, he produces the giant butt plug from his backpack and shows it to his wife, claiming that they can have some fun with it before selling it to the guild to get money for the debt. His wife, however, warns him against it, claiming that it is way too big, even for him, and that he shouldn't accept things from strangers or else he will get scammed again. He tells his wife that this isn't a scam, and that Ren is a wonderful person. He also clarifies that he is not getting the gem for free and will be working for Ren. His wife gets worried and tells him that he promised never to start an OnlyFans again with stranger, but Loris promises that sadly, Ren is not interested, and instead he will be helping him get stuff from the shops and cooking him food whenever he wants. They both turn towards him and bow down to thank him while he takes his leave and starts walking towards his house. He goes into an alley when suddenly something starts happening to him. He keeps getting flashbacks to the time when he was with Loris, and he gets a strong urge to eat his ass. He starts feeling hungry and wonders what's happening to him while his vision starts blurring. He moves quickly towards his house so that he can ask Lorraine about it, but he starts losing his mind even more before completely going on autopilot mode. He enters the house, and through his blurred vision, he spots Lorraine, who was definitely blessed by the god of boobas. She starts talking about what she found out in the books, and all the experiments they need to perform, while he simply stands there and stares at her. She asks whether everything was okay, and he claims that everything was fine before hugging her tightly. She gets shocked and asks what the hell does his incel brain think he is doing, but he doesn't listen to her and keeps grabbing her tighter, while his eyes are aiming at her beautiful neck. Suddenly, his face mask gets modified and his teeth are revealed, which he immediately sinks in Lorraine's body. She starts bleeding and is utterly shocked at this behavior before finally being able to force him away from her. He doesn't seem to remember what he was doing, as he simply starts walking towards her again, while she realizes that his incel brain has gone crazy and he doesn't have control over it. She tries to call him out, but he doesn't listen to her, forcing her to use her super strong magic on him. Her house lights up and Ren drops to the floor motionless. She then uses her magic to calm his brain down and puts him to sleep while she figures out what to do next. By the time night falls, Ren wakes up finally with a headache and looks around to see Lorraine sitting on a chair looking at him. She asks whether he feels normal or not, and Ren looks around to see that his vision has returned to normal. He immediately apologizes to her, but she tells him not to worry as it was nothing but an accident. She then asks him to tell her everything that he remembers from that day. He tells her about how he met a man inside the dungeons and how in the evening he started feeling the strong impulse to eat his ass. After that, he continues that he found Lorraine, who looked really delicious, so he attacked her. She tells him that she expected this to happen, as zombies like to eat human flesh, and it was only a matter of time when Ren felt hungry. She then asks whether his body feels fine, as she used a pretty strong magic on him. He claims that he feels pretty fine, but Lorraine tells him to get some rest regardless while she deals with some errands. Before she could go, however, he stops her and asks her to see the wound. Lorraine ends up agreeing and shows him her massive jiggly wigglies and the wound on her shoulder. She tells her not to worry as she will get the required ointments tomorrow. and that this wound will get healed very quickly. Ren, however, cannot let this golden opportunity go by, and immediately touches her shoulder, possibly creaming his pants, while claiming that he is only trying to heal her. He starts using his magic, and Lorraine claims that she could feel the pain going away. After a while, he tells her to remove the bandages and check the wound. She does so, only to see that most of the wound has been healed and only a small bite mark remains. Ren is able to grab this opportunity to touch a girl again and claims that he wants her to heal completely before using more of his magic to get rid of the bite mark as well. Lorraine is surprised to see that his magic worked pretty well and asks him to take off his shirt. Ren gets excited and immediately removes it, thinking that he could finally boink her, but it turns out that she simply wanted to examine his body, as she thinks he has changed. She turns out to be right, as his body no longer has rotten flesh, but simply looks like someone with a lot of scars on his body. He looks at his face in a mirror and realizes that his mask is modified, but to his surprise, his mask changes again to show his eyes while hiding his jaw. This is very interesting, as this mask might be bound to him on a deeper level, and there is a possibility that he can control and take it off now. He tries to take it off and fails, after which Lorraine tries to pull out the mask, but her pull-out game seems to be pretty weak as she fails and tells him to simply deal with it for now, while they discuss the remaining matters. Lorraine claims that it is possible that he has evolved again, but Ren claims that the last time he evolved, he felt his entire body change, but this time he doesn't remember anything like that happening. Lorraine thinks about it and claims that there is a possibility that he has gone through a minor evolution, as he doesn't look like a zombie anymore. She claims that he looks more like the minions that work for actual vampires. He is very confused about this, but she explains that she thinks this happened because he ended up eating her flesh and blood, which sped up his evolution in the direction of being a vampire. She tells him that she will help him go through the evolution however she could, but in return she tells him that he needs to be a part of her experiments. She tells him that she needs his photographs and a small piece of his skin so she could conduct experiments, and he ends up agreeing. The next morning, he practices outside in the lawn with his sword, only to realize that he feels quicker and stronger than before. He then looks at his sword, which has been completely battered and looks like a saw at this point. He knows that he can't take this sword to a dungeon, so he takes it back to the blacksmith in order to find out whether his actual sword has been completed. The blacksmith gets pretty pissed as the sword is beyond repair at this point and he will have to throw it away. He asks what the hell he does with the sword, and Ren quietly replies that he ended up fighting a giant skeleton. This surprises the blacksmith, but he ends up believing Ren before telling him that his sword is nowhere near completion, and he will need a couple more days to complete it. The blacksmith then tells him that he will give him a different sword for the time being again till his actual sword is completed, and tells him to use it carefully, otherwise he will shove it in his ass. Ren thanks him again and leaves the shop, heading back to Lorraine's house when he spots Loris and his wife buying ingredients and telling everyone that their restaurant is about to open once again. Ren looks at them and decides to go back to their restaurant later, as right now his goal is to kill as many monsters as possible and become a vampire. If you liked this video, you will love the story about this loser who becomes the strongest demon hunter alive and marries his boss.